Welcome to episode 15 of The Process, and this is actually another pre-recorded one back from October 25th with my guy Jacob Schurman. So Jacob goes, he's a couple years younger than me, to Alabama. We dive into how dealing with worldly desires at college, balancing all the different things that you might manage, relationships, school, and all that, and how to do it successfully. I'm very thankful for Jacob. He planted a seed, started a Bible study after I was saved in 2023. Really enjoyed that once a week. And so, yeah, that seed grew so much. I've grown spiritually so much. And so he's someone who I keep in touch with. And, yeah, glad this episode's going out for episode 15. So let's see the growth. And, yeah, obviously the mics and setups aren't quite as they are now, but it's crazy to see how much has evolved just through 15 episodes. So into episode 15, let's go. I'm your host, Paul McCarran, and the whole thing with the process, it's the process of me gaining knowledge and gaining wisdom. My guests are going to provide the knowledge and the wisdom, and I'm doing work at the same time to gain knowledge and wisdom. Process of 2 to 3 years down the line, now I'm providing knowledge and wisdom along with the guests. Welcome to the Process Podcast. How can a student that attends college of the magnitude of Alabama stay grounded in their faith and not conform to worldly desires?
Yeah, so that's okay. So loaded question, first of all. I think it's funny how we're jumping right into it. It's just funny. But obviously there are a lot of things that you can get caught up in when you're at a large school like Alabama. I feel like if you go to any large public university, there are so many things that you could get caught up in, whether that's Greek life, student government, other clubs on organizations. That could just kind of pull your time, make you make decisions. It's also a really vulnerable time in a lot of people's lives because when they make that transition from leaving the home that they grew up in and kind of that sheltered environment to now you're by yourself, no one's here to save you, and you kind of have to figure it out a little bit. Or at least that's how it is for most students, I feel like. Obviously, you're going to still receive support from your family, but they're not right there to just kind of hold your hand, give you step-by-step processes. And I think that the best thing you can do do you say stay in your faith?
Yeah, how do you stay grounded and not conform to the worldly desires like drinking,
Right.
girls, or I guess in girls' sense, like guys, and
Right.
kind of staying in your faith? And that's something I found trouble in with being at Alabama, and my life's changed after the fact. But how can someone going into school kind of set their standards on, hey, this is how I live, and I'm not going to be pulled by these desires?
I think that it's extreme self-awareness. I think that is honestly, it's really funny because we're talking about this in an entrepreneurship class I'm in right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of funny that I'm even bringing that up because she says it every single class, the beginning of class. All right, we're going to go over what we've been talking about. And the first step of becoming an entrepreneur is becoming extremely self-aware, extremely self-aware. And she goes over this theory called bounded rationale. And basically, in your bounded rationale, you have your idea of what the world is, the things that affect it, and that's just all you know, right? People come from different backgrounds. They have different stories that got them to where they are now in life.
And their worldviews are different.
Exactly. And their worldviews are different. And so that's the first step, kind of knowing what you are automatically biased to and what you're kind of already in. And then purposefully knowing that that's your situation and how can I expand my bounded rationale and learn about all the other things and all the other opportunities and options and lifestyles and ways of living. And then you can kind of pursue which ones are most beneficial for you or fit into your faith best.
Yeah, realizing you don't know everything and kind of what you know is a limiting belief at this point.
Exactly.
And so one thing I want to relate to that I've heard from Alex Hormozy is he talks about his thing of success is he grinds very hard towards business. But something I've come to found recently is my success or someone else's success look a lot different. And so what does a success look like to you, and how does that play into what you're doing right now?
So kind of like I was saying earlier, everyone that comes into school doesn't really have these ideas fully formed yet. So it's all the process of college and the experience of college is finding those those things that you're good at and what you're not good at. Repeat the question again.
Yeah, finding your passions. Like, what does success look like for you? Because everyone
Yeah.
has different ideas of success, and that's like when you say your worldviews, and you can kind of find what direction you want to go in. Where are you being directed towards? When you are, I see you. I see you're very focused and thriving on many different aspects. You know, and we've talked. You're graduating in 3 years. How do you manage all these things, and where is that looking to take you?
Right. So the definition of success for me is honestly tying it back to faith. I think that anyone who is really strong in their belief systems or their faith kind of understands that that should be your first reaction to everything. Like people who are really planted in that and can really thrive, like you were kind of saying, and like set these goals, have those foundations set. And that's where I was going with it. Like lots of people don't have that, and when you come into school, you have to find that super quickly. And it shouldn't be a rush. It should be more so like the process. Literally, it should be the process of like finding what works, finding what doesn't, and then going from there. So from my personal experience, I have found that first of all, the group of people you surround yourself with is extremely important. Like the quote, show me your friends and I'll show you your future is so true. Because I mean, if you surround yourself in a group of people who don't set goals, who don't show up every single day when they're needed, who don't help others and lift other people up, then you're not going to be doing those things. And if that's what you want to be doing, then you can't do it in the first place. So my first thing that I did was surround myself with people who bring me up and lift me up. And then I try and do that to every single person I meet. Anyone that I meet, I try and add value to. And I actually thought about starting my own podcast as well. And this was like a couple of years ago when I was a freshman in college. And one of my mentors told me, he said, well, what value are you going to add to other people's lives? Why would they watch? Like, what's a reason that they would watch your podcast? And I was like, well, that's a great question. Like, I just thought that I was going to sit down and have a conversation with people and like just learn. And I thought of it more so from the perspective of I'm going to start this podcast so that I can learn more, when really podcasts in growing a podcast is how many people can I affect?
Yeah. And that's something I've had to dive into deep, making this kind of what I'm pursuing full time.
Right.
It's like, what can I provide my audience? What am I providing? Right. And so I've been doing a deep dive. And so what the process is for me, and kind of, it's funny you led me to this point, but the process for me is like building this podcast. And so right now I realize I don't have all the knowledge, all the wisdom at 22 years old. I feel like I have some, and I've gained a lot just in the last few months.
Yeah.
But a lot of what I'm going to be doing is the guests I have on are going to be the ones providing the knowledge and providing the wisdom. And then I'm putting a lot of work on the side, reading books, watching documentaries on different things like psychology, neuroscience, fitness, all these different things. And now 2 to 3 years down the line, when I've had 200 guests on and I've done all this work on myself, it's no longer like the guests are providing the value, but now along with the guests, I'm providing the value to my audience. And now I've built a personal brand, and I'm looked at, okay, that guy has the wisdom, he has some knowledge, and then you can always learn more, no matter what part of life you're at.
So I guess I have a question for you then.
Yeah.
What would your value proposition to your audience be? Like, what is the primary value of the process?
Yeah, so the process is a self-growth, self-improvement podcast. So every episode is going to be different who the guest is. So some episodes might not provide as much value to my audience, but the audience is going to be people who are wanting to better themselves in some specific, hobby or career, professional, faith, any part of their life. And so my goal is to bring on the guests that can provide that wisdom, and everyone has different things that work for them. So if I can provide my audience a couple of processes or a couple of things they can implement into their daily lives to change them for the better, to positively impact their days or just their lives, that's the goal. Something small. And so Chris Williamson talks about it in his podcast, and people ask him, how do you maintain so much information like that you learn? And he's like, well, I forget most of it, but he's like, the things that really stick out to me and interest me, it sticks. And he's like,
have you heard him say that?
Yeah, I think he said it, or maybe I think he said Tim Ferriss actually said that first.
Yes.
But he talks about that. And so it's like, I realized I'm not going to ever remember everything I hear, but what sticks out, and if I engulf myself in enough information, then what really interests me and the important stuff is going to stick. And that's the information that I
Right.
can provide to my guests that I found value and they might find value in as well. Or maybe it's something that I don't find value in, but I provide them with, and then they can take that.
Exactly.
So that's where I see the process going, and I'm excited about it for sure.
Right. And it's funny that it's funny how conversations go, because one thing leads to the next, and then it always loops back. It's like a good movie.
Yeah.
So kind of going back to your first or second question about success for me and finding what works and what doesn't work goes exactly back to that quote that we just talked about. The
Yeah.
good shit sticks. I mean, quite literally, like when you're trying out all these different things of like, okay, like instead of going to a party on Friday night and then going to a party on Sunday night and then feeling like garbage on, or did I say Sunday
Whatever.
night?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's say Saturday night, you feel garbage on Sunday, you
Yeah.
wake up Monday, and then half of your day Monday feels like you're disorganized.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right, so let's look back at my process and let's see if I can refine it. And that is that whole process of self growth. Like, where did I go wrong and how can I fix it? Those are the two questions. And so then when you start asking these questions, you go through your routine and you're like, all right, what if I didn't go to that party on Friday and Saturday night? What if I reserved one of those nights to help stabilize myself or read a book that night? Like, I'm still going out on one night, getting the social aspect and getting to know and meeting new people, but I'm also feeding into myself and
Yeah.
learning more and expanding that bounded rationale that I have. And then when you kind of figure out and you change that and you see that, oh, wait, I didn't go out. I went out on Friday, had a good time. And then on Saturday, I did this self improvement thing where I read 30 minutes, maybe an hour, or maybe I took the night to myself and I watched a movie or hung out with my close friends to build more intimate relationships. I feel a lot better on Monday now.
Monday. Yeah.
And then you're like, all right, wait, I'm going to try that next weekend and it works again. And then you're like, all right, the good shit sticks. There it is. So, I mean, that is the process of refinement and the process of learning what success can look like through just constantly
just changing
self-evaluating.
variables. And sometimes the biggest things is like a lot of people think self-improvement comes from adding things.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked about this with a buddy the other day.
Yeah.
But a lot of the times the biggest self-improvement and like changes you see in your life are from actually removing things that make you less you.
100%.
So for me, a couple of those things were like, drinking. I completely stopped drinking. I took that out of my life, and the change I saw and the people I started surrounding myself with was amazing. And it's not like I'm shaming drinking or judging anyone that drinks, because I get the appeal to it. But for me, when I removed it, something that wasn't me, it was just the biggest, like one of the bigger changes in my life. And it was amazing, and so that's super cool. And then I would say on the side of, having the influences, in your life, especially at a college like this, what advice would you give to someone who's coming into college that wants to build a community around them that's like-minded at a school like this where drinking, partying is the topics and the things that are prioritized.
Acceptable.
Yeah, acceptable and prioritized. Because being someone who doesn't drink or being someone who doesn't like to party is actually kind of like out of the social norm in a school like this.
So, like I said, that process of self-refinery and finding new things that work is the only way to figure out what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so by doing that every single week and being honest with yourself, like be real. Like I held a life group last year that you were a part of called Be Real. And basically the whole premise of this life group was to look back at what you did in the previous week or the couple months, or if you're new to it, just your whole life. Just, I mean, it can vary by every person's situation and kind of their idea of what's been going on. But by doing that, that's the only way that you're going to improve. So yeah. And the question, I need the question one more time. It's just, I don't know what's happening.
No, you're good. No, dude, we're just thinking, we're letting the conversation flow. But yeah, so how can someone really surround themselves with the right people, the people that are going to lead them to the things they like, not lead them to worldly desires, but maybe the things they actually want in their lifestyle. Because for me, a hard thing when I was here was everyone is trying to pursue one thing, right? Or like a couple things, which is like drinking, girls, this and that. How can someone pursue a group of friends that are going to actually value deep conversation, meaningful values and those kind of things.
Hmm. Yeah, trial and
Just
error.
trial and
It's
error.
literally just trial and error. I mean, that's what's worked for me every single time, and like removing things, adding things to the process, and that's where you'll find the improvement in itself of just changing things and seeing what works and what doesn't work. And that's how you're going to find those friends. If you hang out with one group of friends and you get the same result on Monday morning and you're like, I feel like that last week was not very beneficial to me, I'm going to hang out with another group of friends, and then they prioritize those conversations that you're talking about,
Mm-hmm.
then like, all right, I found my people. Or another thing is just getting plugged into as many networks as you can. Like find a local church if you're religious, and I'm very religious, and I recommend everyone find some sort of greater being that they believe in. Because without faith, I honestly don't think that anyone can properly function or properly have that self refinement process in a healthy way.
Find kind of a meaning and
Exactly.
pursuit of the person that they're bound to be, the purpose that God's put us here for. As like I'm a religious person as well, and one thing I feel like I struggled with is sometimes at school, what is some advice you can give to someone? Because I see you balance it well.
Hmm.
That is torn between the life that college offers them and then the life that leads them to a relationship with Jesus. You know.
Hmm. So last year when I felt like I was kind of caught up in this whole problem, and I'm paying for my tuition,
Mm-hmm.
or at least half of it. That's like the deal. I pay for half, and then my parents are going to pay for the other half. So there's a little bit of financial stress on me to succeed, and I think that that's one thing that kind of catalyzed me wanting to be successful and do these things, because it's not a like I want to do good in school, it's I need to do good in school.
Mm-hmm.
And so that difference between need and want is really important in my life. But funny enough, I was really stressed out one day, and I was having a conversation with a totally random individual that I don't really talk to that much. And it was the most eye-opening thing ever. I basically just vented to him all my problems. I was like, listen, I hate how I have to work on Fridays and Saturdays and everyone else can go out and enjoy this college experience. And man, I almost want to, I don't know, I want to go and meet new girls, but it's weird because I'm in a relationship that I love. Like,
Mm-hmm.
why do I want these things? Or like, I just found myself in this really, really weird situation. And I just felt like I was getting gypped of my college experience, which is kind of what you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, it's funny you say that because I think you're actually living the college experience. Like you are in it right now doing it. Like you're just doing it in a different way than what is socially acceptable or
Yeah.
socially normal. And so when he said that to me, I was like, he's so right. Like I'm literally going through this and complaining about the process that I've been wanting to be in, like that I dreamed
That you
about
might have
years
prayed
before.
for. You know, like you
Exactly.
prayed for, a healthy relationship. You prayed for, the chance to go to school and like
Yeah.
whereas their needs, like you need to do well. I like to
Mhm.
say like you also like I'm sure you see gratitude as well, but I get to. Not
Oh
only do
yeah.
I need to work for this, but I also get to, and I think that's where you're going with that mindset of I'm living the college experience and maybe my college experience, it looks a little different. It's a little harder than others, or
Right.
I'm putting a lot more work, but that's what gives it meaning. And I'm getting, even as much as I am working Friday nights, I'm working Saturday nights, I'm paying off my own school and I get to do these things and not only graduate in 3 years like you're doing, but be involved in a lot of extracurriculars, have a healthy relationship, and then do well in school.
Exactly.
So that leads me to kind of my next question is having all these different things, some things that like I admire a lot of aspects of your life and how you can balance them. How do you balance, your faith, your relationship, friendships, school, and extracurriculars, and how do you deal with the stress of it sometimes?
Right. So balance is balance
It's
is
an
such
interesting term
it
because you'll
is.
never reach it fully, I
Right.
think.
I totally agree with that. I think that life is an even flow, and there are sometimes like, especially in like the religious community, people talk about seasons of life all the
Hmm.
time. Like, okay, like you're in this season of life where you're in college, or like you just got married and you're starting a family. Like this is a new season of life. And so in each different season of life, there are going to be different parameters for what balance actually looks like in that
Hmm.
season of life. So kind of as you were saying, like you don't really think that a true balance will ever be achieved. I think that that's a totally accurate statement because it's always changing in different seasons of life. So to answer your question of how do you find that balance is um
You
try
don't. You
you
don't.
don't. You don't.
So then let me reframe. How are you thriving in multiple different areas of your life at once? Is it because you focus so deeply on one thing at a time
Yes.
and then you maintain the others? Because this is also something I listened to this podcast the other day, but Hormozy talks about, and Chris, they're talking about how if you're putting in four out of tens into multiple things, and that makes your effort into the one thing you're focusing on at 8 out of 10, you're never going to make the next level in that 8 out of 10. But when you drop the other things, like let's say you drop your fitness, you drop your whatever it is to 1 out of 10s, and now you make room to make the one thing, let's say business, your business a 10 out of 10, you're
Hmm.
going to see the strides in the 10 out of 10s. But what it takes to maintain the other things you're focused on are just 1 out of 10s. And you'll maintain and you'll be able to make strides instead of kind of staying in that even ground with everything else.
For sure. And I think that maintaining the things that you've worked so hard to get already is important. But if you truly do maintain them well, then they will understand, like your friends or the people you're in a relationship with. If you have truly maintained that and put your all towards it up to that moment, they will understand when you have to take a little bit away from them to reallocate that energy into something else that's going to get you to the next height. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
And something you just said that made me have a realization, I thought you might have gone there, that's super cool, is not only did you put the effort and energy into those relationships, but now when you maybe back it down and maintain the relationships at a 1 out of 10, they might pour more into you with how much energy you poured into them on the front end. So not
Mm-hmm.
only is it a 1 out of 10 and
Yeah,
it may be maintained, but they may pour their energy into you while it's a 1 out of 10 and make you even better off in the other things you're doing in your lives, which
a
is
hundred
cool.
percent. Like I find that when I'm most stressed out and like reaching those new limits in other areas of my life, those people that I've built relationships with pour into me even more. Like what you were just saying, like that's when I really need that support system and that group to pour into me. And that's when they do it. So I think that what you just said there is completely accurate of that being, if you do give your heart and soul to the people that you're around in your support system and you truly do prioritize those relationships, then they'll be there for you when you most need it to pursue other things that you know will be beneficial for the future. And there's actually a quote that I'll say. It's from who's the okay karate guy Lee, is it Bruce Lee?
Oh yeah, Bruce Lee.
Bruce Lee. So Dana White has a super big not obsession
Quote.
with
He has
Bruce
a big
Lee.
quote on his wall, right?
Yep.
I don't know what it is, but what is it?
So basically, it's from Bruce Lee, and this is kind of just
Yeah.
paraphrasing, but he says there, like Bruce Lee's quote is, "There are no limits in life for a man. There are only plateaus. A
Hmm.
man must constantly exceed his limits." And I think that that is such a true quote because, like you said earlier in the podcast, like the more and more you experience, like you're never going to be able to know everything, but the good shit sticks. And you just
Hmm.
have to keep remembering those little building blocks that got you to the point that you're at. And then, kind of like a toolbox, you just have to pull out when it's necessary one of those things that you learned from an earlier situation to get you to the next step.
Yeah.
And then, once you're at that next step, you're like, oh, wait, I actually already experienced something like this 2 years ago when I was struggling in that. And this this action or this thing that I just did or in that situation 2 years ago is what got me out of it. I can now apply that to my life now, and then it keeps getting better, and you just keep going.
Yeah. I mean, that's what life is.
Yeah,
Like you said, it's a trial and an error.
yeah,
You find a solution. And when you come across those things in the future, it's not quite a habit because you haven't had it so many times. You start figuring the things out quicker and quicker every time you come across them.
100%.
And that leads kind of to the last thing I want to talk about is staying staying power. So we had a church service. It was for our young adults group, and it was talking about staying power and something that's kind of been a very almost it seems like a message that God's kind of trying to send me lately is the power of staying with something, staying through something. And so finding what you really want. And for me, it's like this podcast and really putting inputs in because nothing great is built overnight. And I think a lot of times in this day and age with social media, with the internet, with technology, people think their business or their new venture in whatever aspect it might be is going to develop over time, like really quickly.
Mhm.
And so that's something like using the rule of like hundreds. I've started looking at, instead of something that's going to come this quick, it's like after I start doing 100 episodes of this podcast, then
Right.
can I look back and be like, okay, I should see some progress. And it's the ability to overcome the different ebbs and flows of life. And so one of them is the emotional cycle of change, which I've kind of learned of recently. But everyone's going to hit a valley of despair. It's like a time where you're like, how do I move on? Where do I go? And it's kind of that block that a lot of people can't get past. And it's a cycle of failure. You go from informed optimism when you start something new to then, um, uninformed optimism when you start something new to informed pessimism. So you're like, okay, this is going to be harder than I think. Then you
Mhm.
hit a valley of despair. And whether you can get past that tough time and stay with it, that's when people either determine when they're going to go to informed optimism. So now, okay, they realize how hard it is, but they got some success. And then the final stage of the emotional cycle of change is success and fulfillment. And very few people ever reach this. And that's just due to the fact that they always hit that valley of despair and don't know how to get through it. And so that's when, in the staying power lesson, Aaron talks about how the power to just stay with something no matter what comes your way. And I think for me and you, it's, praying and relying on our faith and what we're
Mhm.
doing. But it's like that's going to be the difference between successful people and non-successful people, is the people who can actually stay with what they've been called for.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I could have said it any better myself. You have to. Mike Tyson said in all of his workouts, he was like, if you do something to the point where you can't do it anymore, like you start giving out, that's your beginning.
Yeah.
That was his beginning in his workouts. Like literally, he said he'd do 100 push-ups, and then he wouldn't be able to do any more. And
Yeah.
that's the beginning of your workout. Like that's where you hit that valley of despair, and then the true side of you is going to come out. Like you're either going to keep going and not give up and be resilient, or you're going to fail. You're going to fail at it, and that's that process of refinement that we always talk about. Like if you do end up failing, it's not a bad thing. I mean, who's the famous bodybuilder that talks about you have to reach failure?
Oh, I think it's
Do you know
Tom
who
Platts.
Tom
Tom
Platz?
Platts
Exactly. Yeah.
talks about that, and that's real. And something I've realized lately is I'm kind of a perfectionist, and
Hmm.
I've been having this trouble dealing with failure because I've never really failed. And I feel like the society these days, and I talked about this in a group discussion the other day. The society kind of makes it seem like failure isn't accepted throughout school and different things. It's like you're not supposed to fail your classes. You're not supposed to do this. And like, yeah, you don't want to fail your classes. It's like failure is a part of life that I feel like has been preached as you grow up is not great. It's like
Right.
it's not a good thing. And so even just when I decided I was going to go from running a marketing agency, that was what I was doing, to realizing I want to do this pod full time and this is what my passion is. I almost saw it as like a failure because in a sense it is, right? But I didn't want to tell myself like this isn't, like I kept saying to myself, this is not a failure. I just figured out what I actually want to do. And I was like, why is it so bad if I failed? It's like it's not bad. I failed at something that I didn't spend a ton of time on, but it led me to the thing that I really wanted to do. And so I had to just be like, I did fail at it. Whatever.
Right.
I started it. Maybe I could have maybe been successful, but I failed because I figured out I want to do something else. And at the end of the day, I learned, and now I'm doing what I really want to do, what I love to do, and what I feel like, what I want to pursue. So
Yeah.
it's
And
cool.
yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, the strides that I've seen you make, like just through your social media, is very inspiring to even the younger individuals. Like I know a bunch of people in my class at Alabama have been talking and saying that what you're doing is really cool. So I think that
Yeah,
that's
dude.
awesome that you've kind of found that formula of success and realizing that there is no true formula to success. It's just trial and error, learning different things, surrounding yourself with people who might have a different perspective on life, and then adding it to your toolbox so you can build on those building blocks and continue to exceed those levels. And you reach that plateau, you reach that valley of despair, and then you use all the things that have gotten you there in the first place. David Goggins talked about the cookie jar.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you reach in, you get some what do you call it? Experience. You pull on your experience and you're like, I got through this, I can get through this.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that's super cool, dude. And I appreciate you saying that because it's been awesome. And obviously I'm still 22, learning every day, and I don't have everything figured out. But what I have figured out is like kind of where I want to go and kind of
Mm-hmm.
the direction that my life's pulling me. And I think it really comes down to when you can make decisions based on like what is actually good for yourself is when you're going to be able to be selfless and help others.
Exactly.
Because you got to take care of yourself to take care of others.
Uh-huh.
And so, learning every day, but yeah, just figuring it out one day at a time. But that's Jacob Schurman, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate him for coming on, taking a day out of his busy schedule. He's graduating in 3 years, and he's got a lot of other things he's thriving in. So awesome to have him on.
Yeah.
Any
Sure.
last things you got to say? Yeah, you want to say? Any goals you're reaching for? You can look back at this podcast and
Goals. I mean, eventually, kind of like yourself, I want to own my own business one of these days. So I think that it's inspiring, like I said, to see someone that I've known for quite a long time to continue to pursue their dreams. So kudos to you for that. Eventually, one of these days, I'll have my own business, and I'll look back at this and say, you know what, I did give some of my time on a Friday just to kind of go and have a conversation about how I can get there.
yeah,
And
not knowing what the conversation
yeah,
would look like. And this is a new podcast, so I appreciate you coming on, and I know you're gonna be successful one day. And someone I look up to. And when I was getting started my faith journey, had the Bible study that honestly I loved every week. So that's
for sure,
something
man.
I'm thankful
But
for.
yeah, thanks, man. I
So
appreciate it.
awesome, great to have you on.
Yeah, yeah,
Thanks.
yeah.